Imagine your daughter walking up to the house you lived in for 40 years only to find a stranger opening the door instead of you. She thought the home was hers. She thought you would never resist. But that day, she learned the truth. This isn't just about a house. It's about control, betrayal, and a mother who refused to be erased. But what if the fight for dignity uncovers a truth no one was ready to face? What followed ripped open family secrets, lies, and a trust that could change everything. I want to tell you about the morning when my daughter arrived at what she believed was her new home. She came with 2 suitcases, a smile on her face, and a plan already written in her mind. But instead of me opening the door, a stranger stood there. That single moment changed everything. I was not inside the house. I was across the street, sitting quietly in my car, watching. My name is Margaret Collins. I am 67 years old with gray hair tied in a loose bun. For 40 years, I lived in that little blue house at the end of Maple Street. Every wall carried memories of birthdays, family dinners, and quiet evenings with my late husband, David. But that morning, the house no longer belonged to me. My daughter Emily thought she had claimed it. She thought I would never resist. She thought I would simply hand over the place where I built my life. She was wrong. To understand why I sold my own home without telling her, you need to go back 6 months. That was the day Emily sat at my kitchen table with her husband Jason and told me something that broke my heart. It was a quiet afternoon. I was drinking tea when Emily walked in with Jason and their 2 children. She hugged me quickly, Jason nodded politely, and the kids ran off to the living room. Everything looked normal, but I could see something different in Emily's eyes. A mother always knows. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. I smiled and told her to sit down. Jason leaned back in his chair while Emily folded her hands. She took a deep breath. "Mom, you know the kids are growing. Houses are expensive now. Your house is perfect for them." I blinked. "What do you mean, perfect for them?" Jason added calmly. "They need space, a backyard, good schools. Your house is ideal." I stared at them. "But this is my house." Emily waved her hand gently. "Yes, but you don't really need such a big place anymore. You could move somewhere smaller, maybe a retirement apartment." Her words felt heavy. This house was not just walls and windows. It was my life. David and I bought it when we were young. Emily took her first steps in the living room. Every corner held a memory. I shook my head. "Emily, I live here." Jason leaned forward. "It would be easier for you." I asked quietly. "Easier for who?" Emily did not answer right away. Then she said something that cut deeper than anything else. "Mom, eventually the house will belong to me anyway. We're just asking you to move a little earlier." I sat there in silence. I had helped them many times before. Money, babysitting, school fees. But this was different. They were not asking for help. They were asking for my life. I said softly, "I cannot give you my house." Emily's face hardened. Jason stood up. "That's disappointing." Emily pushed her chair back. "Fine, then don't be surprised when we stop helping you later. Doctor's care, transportation. You might need us one day, and we will remember this conversation." They left without saying goodbye. The house felt empty after that. Her words echoed in my mind. "We will remember this conversation." That night, I walked through the house slowly. The hallway, the kitchen, the backyard, all filled with memories. But another thought began to grow inside me. If they already believed the house belonged to them, maybe it was time to do something they would never expect. What I decided the next morning would shock my daughter more than anything she had ever imagined. That night after Emily and Jason left, I could not sleep. Their words kept echoing in my mind. We will remember this conversation. It was not just a sentence, it was a warning. I walked through the house slowly, touching the walls, looking at the photographs, remembering the laughter that once filled the rooms. But instead of comfort, I felt unease. My daughter was not asking anymore. She was planning. She believed the house was already hers. The next morning, I made a decision that even surprised me. I called a real estate agent named Linda. 2 days later, she sat at the same kitchen table where Emily had demanded the house. Linda looked around and said, "It's a beautiful place, Margaret. It will sell quickly." I nodded. I want to sell it, but quietly. No sign in the yard, no public listing. Linda raised her eyebrows. "A private sale? That can be arranged. Do your children know?" I shook my head. "No, and I want to keep it that way." She studied me for a moment, then smiled gently. Sometimes a fresh start is the best thing a person can do. 3 months later, the house was sold, but Emily still believed she would move in soon. She had already told the children this would be their new home. She had even started planning where the swing set would go in the backyard. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and found Emily and Jason in my yard with a tape measure. "What are you doing?" I asked. Emily looked surprised. "Oh, Auntie, we were just looking." Jason answered calmly, planning where the kids' swing set could go. My stomach dropped. "Swing set?" Emily smiled. "When we move in." I stared at them. "What do you mean when you move in?" Jason shrugged. "It's only a matter of time. You'll understand eventually." That was the moment I realized something painful. My daughter was not waiting for permission. She was waiting for me to become weak, waiting for the day I could not say no anymore. That night, I stood in the hallway looking at the family photos. I thought about David, my late husband, who had always told me to protect myself. And I knew what I had to do. I had already sold the house, but now I understood why it was the right choice. Emily was not just asking for space. She was trying to take my life from me. Weeks passed, and the day finally came. Emily arrived with her suitcases ready to move in, but instead of me opening the door, the new owner stood there. Confused, Emily turned her head and saw me across the street in my car. Our eyes met. Her face turned pale. She walked toward me, her hand shaking. "Mom, what did you do?" she demanded. Jason joined her, his face red. "You sold it?" "Yes," I said calmly. "It was my house." Emily's voice trembled. "You can't do that. We already told the kids this would be their new home." I looked at her carefully. "You promised them something that was never yours to promise." Jason clenched his teeth. "Where are we supposed to live now? We gave notice to our landlord." I stared at them. "Then you should go back to your apartment." Emily shook her head. "Cancel the sale. Call the buyer." The new owner, standing on the porch, laughed softly. "I already paid for the house." Emily froze. Jason ran his hair through his hair. "This is unbelievable." Emily leaned closer to my car window. "You will regret this, Mom." But what Emily said next would shake me even more, because she claimed my late husband had left papers that could change everything. After Emily shouted that I would regret selling the house, I thought the storm was over. But 3 days later, my phone rang nonstop. Emily, Jason, Emily again, Jason again. Voicemails filled with anger. "You embarrassed us. The kids are crying. Fix this." At first, I ignored them, but eventually I answered. Emily's voice came sharp through the line. "Mom, how could you do this to us?" I stayed calm. "Lower your voice." There was silence. Then she asked the question I had been expecting. "Where are you living now?" Emily believed I had moved to a small apartment nearby. She thought she could still visit, still pressure me, but she did not know the truth. I had moved to another state, to a quiet town where nobody knew my name. "I moved," I said. Yes, obviously you moved, but where? Another state. Her voice cracked. What? Jason grabbed the phone. You can't just disappear. I smiled softly. Actually, I can. Emily came back on the line, her tone shifting from anger to desperation. Mom, why are you doing this to us? I remembered her calling me selfish, measuring my garden without asking, planning my life as if it were hers. So I answered clearly. Emily, you tried to take my life from me and I refused. There was silence. Then Emily said something that made my chest tighten. You may have won this little battle, but you forgot one thing. I frowned. What? Her voice grew confident. You forgot about the papers Dad signed before he died. My heart skipped. David had been gone for 8 years. He was a gentleman who loved fixing things and planting tomatoes in the backyard. Hearing Emily bring up his name like that felt strange. What papers are you talking about? I asked. The house agreement, she said quickly. Jason added, your husband signed a document giving Emily partial rights to the property. My stomach tightened. That's not possible. Emily replied, oh, it's possible. Dad wanted to make sure the house would eventually belong to me. I stood by the window of my new home, looking at the garden outside. Emily, your father would have told me something like that. She answered smoothly. Maybe he planned to, but he died before he could. The words felt rehearsed, too neat, too certain. David and I had shared everything. Bills, repairs, family problems. There was never a secret like that between us. Jason spoke again. You might want to call your lawyer before celebrating too much. If the house sale violated that agreement, the buyer could lose the property. My heart began to race. They were trying to scare me, trying to make me panic. I stayed calm. Send me the document. Emily sounded surprised. You want to see it? Yes. Jason said quickly. Fine, we'll send it. The call ended. Minutes later, a message arrived, a photo of a document titled Property Transfer Agreement. Below it was David's name and a signature that looked like his. My hands trembled. I had seen David's handwriting thousands of times. The signature looked real. I called my lawyer, Robert Sanders, who had handled the sale. My daughter claims my late husband signed a document giving her rights to the house. Robert was quiet. Then he said, Margaret, during the sale, we performed a full property title search. There were no additional ownership claims, none at all. If such a document existed, it would have appeared, unless it was created recently. Created recently? I whispered. Robert cleared his throat. Send me the document. I forwarded the image. 5 minutes later, Robert called back. Margaret, this appears fraudulent. The date listed is 2 years after your husband's death, and the formatting does not match legal property agreements. Relief and sadness filled me. Emily had lied. She had used her father's name to try to take my home. But just when I thought the forgery was the end of it, Jason mentioned something far more dangerous, a family trust that could change everything. When Robert confirmed the document was fake, I thought the nightmare was finally over. My daughter had tried to use her father's name to take my home, but the forgery was exposed. I felt both hurt and relieved. Yet I should have known Emily and Jason would not stop there. That evening, my phone rang again. Emily's voice was sharp. Did you check the document? Yes, I said calmly. It's fake. The date is wrong. Your father died 2 years before that. Silence followed. Then Jason's voice cut in from the background. That doesn't prove anything. I stayed firm. Robert already documented the forgery. Emily's tone shifted, nervous now. You can't prove we created it. I don't need to, I replied. The evidence speaks for itself. Jason's voice came back, colder than before. You think this is over? You may have sold the house, but the children still have rights. My stomach tightened. What rights? Jason took a slow breath. Rights connected to the family trust your husband created. The word trust made my chest ache. A memory rushed back. David sitting in the living room years ago, reading a folder of papers. He had told me he was making sure I was protected if anything happened to him. At the time, I hadn't thought much about it. David was always careful with documents. Emily spoke quickly now, her voice full of confidence. Dad set up a family trust years ago. The trust says certain assets must remain within the family, and the house is included. I leaned back in my chair. Who is the trustee? Jason answered without hesitation. Emily is. My eyebrows lifted. Emily, the trustee? That did not sound like David. He loved her, but he knew she could be impulsive. Giving her control over family money was not his style. When was this trust created? I asked. 10 years ago, Emily replied quickly. That answer made me pause. 10 years ago, David and I were still managing everything together. If a trust had been created, I would have known, unless it was done quietly without my involvement. Emily continued, The lawyer is already reviewing everything. You'll hear from him soon. You should have given us the house, Mom. Now things are going to get complicated. The call ended. I sat quietly in my new kitchen, staring at the clock on the wall. The silence felt heavy, but instead of panic, curiosity grew. Something about their story did not make sense. David never hid financial decisions from me, not once in 40 years. I called Robert again. Jason mentioned a family trust. Robert asked, Did you ever sign trust documents with your husband? No. Are you listed as trustee? No. Robert exhaled. Margaret, creating a trust without informing a spouse is very unusual, not impossible, but rare. And during the sale, we checked the property title. It showed only one owner, you. Relief washed over me. So the trust cannot control the house. Not unless the house was legally transferred into the trust, was it? No. Then they may be misunderstanding or twisting the truth. Send me any documents they provide. That night, I opened a box of old papers David had kept. Inside was a folder labeled Estate Planning. My hands trembled as I opened it. There it was, a trust document. But it was not called a family trust. It was called the Margaret Protection Trust. The trustee was not Emily, it was David's brother Michael. And the document clearly stated, Margaret retained full control over her primary residence. Emily had no authority, no ownership rights, nothing. David had created the trust to protect me, not to control me. But the final paragraph of that trust revealed something even more shocking. David had already predicted Emily's behavior years before. When I opened the folder labeled Estate Planning, my hands trembled. Inside was the truth. David had indeed created a trust, but it was not the family trust Emily claimed. It was called the Margaret Protection Trust. The trustee was not Emily. It was David's brother, Michael, and the document stated clearly, Margaret retains full control over her primary residence. Emily had no authority, no ownership rights, nothing. I kept reading, and then I reached the final paragraph. The words made me stop and read them again, slowly, just to be sure. David had written, If at any time Margaret Collins feels pressured, manipulated, or threatened regarding her home or financial assets by any beneficiary, the trustee is instructed to limit that beneficiary's access to the trust immediately. I leaned back in my chair. David had known. Years before he died, he had already seen something in Emily that worried him. He had predicted this moment. The thought made my chest ache, not because of the trust itself, but because my husband had quietly prepared for the possibility that our daughter might one day try to take advantage of me. My phone buzzed suddenly. A message appeared from an unknown number. This is Attorney Daniel Harris representing Emily Collins regarding the family trust. Please contact me immediately. I stared at the message. Emily had already hired a lawyer. She was moving quickly, trying to turn this into a legal battle. But she did not know the truth yet. The trust did not give her power. It actually limited her. I placed the phone down and looked again at the trust papers. David had written them with care, every line designed to protect me, and now those words were about to become the center of a fight between mother and daughter. Later that evening, Emily called again. Her voice was sharp. "Em, you should know something. The lawyer says the trust proves the house must stay in the family." I stayed calm. "Emily, I have the trust papers right here, and they say something very different." She hesitated. "What do you mean?" "The trust was created to protect me, not to give you control, and it says clearly that if I feel pressured, your access can be limited." Her silence lasted several seconds. Then Jason's voice came through the line. "You're twisting it." "No," I said firmly. "I'm reading it exactly as it was written." Emily's tone grew colder. "You think this will stop us? You think one piece of paper will change what's coming?" I looked at the trust again. "Emily, this paper is not just a piece of paper. It is your father's warning. He saw this coming, and he made sure I would be safe." The line went quiet. For the first time, I felt the weight shift. Emily had tried to use her father's name against me, but now his words stood between us. But Emily was not ready to give up. Her lawyer stepped in, and what he revealed next threatened to turn this family conflict into a full legal war. The trust papers were still on my table when another message arrived. It was from attorney Daniel Harris, claiming to represent Emily. "Please contact me immediately regarding the family trust." I knew what this meant. Emily had already pulled a lawyer into the fight. She wanted to turn this into a legal war. But she did not realize the trust she was talking about was not the one David had created. I called Robert, my lawyer, again. Emily's attorney reached out. He says the trust proves the house must stay in the family. Robert spoke carefully. "Margaret, if they are working off false or incomplete documents, the truth will come out. The trust you found is valid. It protects you." That gave me some relief, but I also knew Emily would not stop. She believed she had power now. Later that evening, Emily called. Her voice was sharp. "Mom, you should have given us the house. Now the lawyer says you violated the trust." I stayed calm. "Emily, I have the real trust papers, and they say something very different." She hesitated. "What do you mean?" "The trust was created to protect me, not to give you control. And it says clearly that if I feel pressured, your access can be limited." Her silence lasted several seconds. Then Jason's voice came through the line. "You're twisting it." "No," I said firmly. "I'm reading it exactly as it was written." Emily's tone grew colder. "You think this will stop us? You think one piece of paper will change what's coming?" I looked at the trust again. "Emily, this paper is not just a piece of paper. It is your father's warning. He saw this coming, and he made sure I would be safe." The line went quiet. For the first time, I felt the weight shift. Emily had tried to use her father's name against me, but now his words stood between us. The next morning, Robert called. "Margaret, I reviewed the trust again. It is airtight. If Emily's lawyer pushes, we can respond with the original document, and if necessary, we can request the court to limit her access." I nodded. David already wrote that clause. He wanted me safe. Robert paused. "Margaret, you should prepare yourself. They may try another angle. They may claim the trust was changed later or that new documents exist." I sighed softly. "Then we will face it." That afternoon, another call came. This time it was Daniel Harris himself. His tone was professional but firm. "Mrs. Collins, I represent your daughter. She believes the family trust requires the house to remain in the family. Selling it may have violated that agreement." I answered calmly. "Mr. Harris, I have the original trust papers. They state clearly that I retain full control over my home, and they also state that if I feel pressured, Emily's access can be limited." There was silence. Then he said, "I will need to review those documents." "I will send them," I replied. When the call ended, I sat quietly. Emily had tried to use her father's name, then a forged paper, and now a lawyer. But David's words were stronger than all of it. He had seen this coming years before. But Emily was not finished. She and Jason began searching for another way to claim power, and what they tried next would test the limits of family loyalty. After the lawyer's call, I thought Emily might finally step back. The trust papers were clear, and David's words were stronger than any argument she could make, but I underestimated her determination. Emily and Jason began searching for another way to claim power. They stopped talking about the forged document and the trust directly. Instead, they started focusing on the children. One evening, Emily called again. Her tone was softer this time. "Mom, the kids are confused. They don't understand why you sold the house. They think you don't want them to have a home." I listened quietly. She was trying a new angle, using the children as leverage. "Emily," I said slowly, "I love my grandchildren, but promising them something that was never yours to promise was unfair. You created their disappointment, not me." Her silence lasted a moment, then Jason's voice came in, sharper. "Families are supposed to help each other. You're turning your back on your own blood." I stayed calm. "I have helped you many times, but giving away my home is not help. It is surrender, and I will not surrender my life." Jason muttered something under his breath, then hung up. Days later, another message arrived. This time, it was not about the house. It was about money. Emily claimed David had left accounts tied to the trust, and she insisted those accounts gave her rights to certain assets. I called Robert again. He reviewed the trust carefully. "Margaret, the accounts are listed, but they are controlled by the trustee, Michael. Emily has no authority. If she tries to claim them, she will face legal consequences." That gave me relief, but also sadness. My daughter was not just fighting for a house anymore. She was reaching for anything she could grab. The next week, Emily and Jason showed up in my new town. I saw them from the window of my small white house. They had driven hours to find me. Emily knocked on the door. "Mom, we need to talk." I opened it slowly. "You shouldn't be here." Jason stepped forward. "We're not leaving until you explain why you're doing this." I looked at them carefully. "Because I want peace. Because I want dignity. Because I will not be pressured anymore." Emily's eyes narrowed. "You think you can hide behind papers and lawyers, but this is about family, and family doesn't walk away." I answered softly. "Family also doesn't threaten. Family doesn't forge documents. Family doesn't try to take what isn't theirs." Jason clenched his jaw. "You'll regret this." I shook my head. "No, I regret trusting you with too much already." They stood there for a moment, then turned back to their car. As they drove away, I felt a strange calm. David's trust had given me strength. His words had reminded me that protecting myself was not selfish, it was necessary. But I also knew something else. Emily was not finished. She had already tried lies, lawyers, and leverage, and the way she looked at me before leaving told me she was planning something new. What Emily attempted next would not just test the trust, it would test the very bond between mother and daughter, pushing it to the breaking point. Emily and Jason had already tried everything: pressure, forged papers, lawyers, even the children. Each time, David's words and the trust he created stood like a wall between us, but they were not ready to stop. Weeks later, another call came. Emily's voice was calm, almost too calm. Mom, we've spoken to Daniel again. He says even if the trust protects you, there are other ways. He says family assets can be challenged if beneficiaries prove neglect. I frowned. Neglect? Jason's voice came in, steady but cold. If you move away and cut ties, we can argue you abandoned family responsibility. Courts listen to that. I stayed quiet for a moment. They were not just fighting for a house anymore. They were trying to paint me as someone who had failed my own family. Finally, I answered, Emily, responsibility does not mean surrender. I raised you, supported you, helped you, but I will not let you take my life from me. Her tone sharpened. You think you're safe because of papers, but papers can be challenged. I looked at the trust again, and lies can be exposed. The line went silent. Days passed. I heard nothing from them. Then one morning, a letter arrived. It was from Daniel Harris, Emily's lawyer. He requested a formal meeting to review the trust. I called Robert immediately. Margaret, he said, this is their last attempt. They want to intimidate you, but the trust is clear. If they push, we can show the clause David wrote, the one that limits their access if you feel pressured. That clause is your shield. I nodded. David saw this coming. Robert paused. Yes, he protected you before he left, and now his words are stronger than theirs. The meeting was scheduled a week later. I walked into Robert's office with the trust papers in my hand. Emily and Jason were already there, sitting beside Daniel. Emily's eyes were sharp, Jason's jaw tight. Daniel began, Mrs. Collins, we believe the trust requires the house to remain in the family. Selling it may have violated that. Robert leaned forward. We have the original trust. It states clearly that Margaret retains full control over her home, and it includes a clause that limits any beneficiary who pressures her. By standing here today, Emily has already triggered that clause. Emily's face changed. What clause? Robert handed her the document. She read the final paragraph. Her hands trembled slightly. Jason leaned closer, his face pale. Daniel cleared his throat. This changes things. Robert spoke firmly. It ends things. Margaret is protected. The trust was designed for this exact situation. Emily looked at me, her eyes full of something I could not name. Anger, disbelief, maybe even regret. So Dad never wanted me to have the house? I answered softly. He wanted me to be safe. He saw how far you might go, and he made sure I would not be alone. Jason stood up quickly. This isn't over. Robert replied calmly. Legally, it is. Emily stayed seated, staring at the paper. For the first time, she had no words. I walked out of the office with Robert beside me. The air outside felt lighter. David's trust had carried me through. His warning had protected me, and now the battle was finished. This was never just about a house. It was about dignity, control, and the strength to say no even to your own family. And in the end, David's foresight reminded me of something simple but powerful. Protecting yourself is not selfish, it is survival.